and welcome to Pharma-Code. My name is Raphael. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about why I do not want to work with any of the FAANG or big tech companies. Now, don't get me wrong, this video is not to bash at the big tech companies and it's not to bash at those who work there. This is just me explaining my personal reasons to why I do not want to work with any of them, at least for now. So now, to be very objective, right, there are a lot of pros to working at the FAANG companies. I mean, the FAANG companies include Meta, Alphabet, Netflix, Uber, all the big tech companies that are out there. Okay, there are a lot of pros to working with them, right? They really have very high salaries, even for software engineers in Canada. Right now, the average of what a software engineer earns in Canada is somewhere between 83 to 130,000 Canadian dollars. The FAANG companies would pay almost twice that amount. You see people earning there somewhere between 200 to 250,000 Canadian dollars. So they pay really high, and it's a benefit to work with them. They also have stock options and annual bonuses. All of these can serve as additional income, right? So it really makes sense to want to work with them. They also have great perks, so things like the best healthcare coverage, extensive leaves, lunch, a whole lot of other packages that just make working with them really beneficial. There's also this form of job stability that comes with working with a FAANG company. And however, right these days, you would actually want to question the job stability with them, because they have been doing a whole lot of massive layoffs recently. I mean, layoffs that goes in the thousands, and understandably so, because right now a lot of countries are going through recession, and so, well, it makes sense to want to cut off some costs. So I would want to question job stability. But however, before this period, the FAANG companies were practically the tech companies that offer the best job stability before this current recession anyway. There's also this prestige that comes with working with a FAANG company, adding Google or Facebook or Netflix or Uber, to your resume, or Microsoft or Amazon. Adding these companies to your resume kind of gives you a form of prestige. These days, even a thing to call yourself ex-Google, ex-Facebook, and the likes. So there's this prestige that comes with working with these FAANG companies. And of course, with the prestige comes the open doors, right? So whenever recruiters say things like ex-Google or ex-Facebook, they are really open to wanting to make you come and work in their company because of it has this, I think it validates your skill. It feels like, I think recruiters think like, yeah, because you've worked for Facebook or you've worked for Google, then there's a good chance that you are highly skilled, you are very intelligent, you are one of the brightest, and definitely you should come work with them. Another major pro to working with these big tech companies would be you have the feeling that you are working on a product that is definitely going to impact billions of users around the world. And so it gives you a sense of importance, a sense of fulfillment working with these companies, I think. So those are the pros I could think of. I believe there are quite a number of them. However, there are some cons to working with the big tech companies. We have the very first thing, before you even get to enter, there are multiple rounds of technical and non-technical interviews. And sometimes this can be very demoralizing, especially when you've probably gone to a couple of stages and then you are dropped off, or just the mental stress of going through all of these stages of interviews alone. It's in itself, I think, a disadvantage, I guess. A lot of people who have also worked with these FAANG companies have complained about how they feel like a small cog in a very large machine. it's hard to feel your impacts. Like when you eventually get into the company and then you realize that you are just one tiny piece in a tiny grain of sand in on the beach or something like that. You feel like the impact of what you are doing is not felt in the company, so it makes you feel like you are more or less doing nothing. And you don't want to wake up every morning getting to work and feel like, what is the importance of what I'm doing, right? It can bring this form of low morale to your day-to-day living. You also feel that another con is developers feel or engineers feel like they have little to no personal impact. So it feels like those at the top are the ones always making the decisions, and then you can hardly pass your ideas up to be implemented. However, if you work with any small or medium-sized company, you can easily pass your ideas on to your manager or to even the CTO directly, right? So that is something that you wouldn't feel in the big tech companies, and it kind of makes sense because these big tech companies have established they've made an established revenue pattern or revenue model, and you just coming in to bring one idea, chances are it will most likely be rejected. um and so another disadvantage is the corporate structure, which kind of falls down to having low impact, right? In a small or medium sized company, you can put your ideas to your manager, to the CTO directly, or even to the CEO, right? And then you can, if the idea sounds good, you can rapidly see changes made to implement the idea. However, in big tech companies, you barely ever get to make a game-changing decision in those companies. Another very common disadvantage that has been mentioned is the level of impact your code has, right? I've seen videos from ex big tech companies, ex Google, ex Facebook, and the likes, who have mentioned that, specifically with Google, they could work for months and none of their code has made it to production yet. And so, like I said earlier, it feels like, how much impact am I making? And so sometimes that can actually lower your morale. Another thing is work-life balance. Although this is not a very common disadvantage, a couple of people have mentioned that depending on the project that they worked on, sometimes the amount of work can be so demanding that they don't have personal time to to engage in their hobbies, to spend with family or things like that. However, I think people have mentioned that it kind of depends on the project you're working on. There's also the potential to get yourself stuck in a high cost of living. So with most of these big tech companies, they are usually situated in the very expensive cities. So you would see like openings in Ontario, openings in British Columbia, and they would require that you move to those expensive locations, right? And so even though you are earning significantly higher, almost times two of what an average engineer would earn, you end up living in a very expensive city, and then it just kind of waters down how much you earn. That's also another disadvantage. Another thing that has also been passed around recently, that has also been mentioned recently, is the fact that a lot of these big tech companies work with their custom made or custom developed tools, and so you kind of don't get to play around with tools that are popular out there or alternative tools out there. So if you are working with a particular tool, you don't get to experience something else. So for instance, if you're working with Google, definitely you have to use things like Angular, and then you don't get to play around with React. And if you are in Facebook, you of course you have to do React, and then you don't get to play with Angular. And so eventually, when you leave, you are almost stuck with the set of tools that are used in that company, with very limited or low experience with other tools, right, or other languages or other basically things you work with every day. Another disadvantage is ethics. So most of these big tech companies have a whole lot of ethical lawsuits, um, and sometimes it might feel like, am I really the good guy if I'm working for this big tech company who is mining our data, who is serving me a kind of news that is mad to the marginalized people, who is doing this, who is doing that. And so sometimes you feel, how much impact, how much am I contributing to this good or to this bad side of this company? So it kind of, you might want to begin to think about things like that. And another disadvantage is that most of these big tech companies have a very high turnover rate. A very good example is Amazon. Practically all the big tech companies, really, people barely work for 1 or 2 years, maximum 2 3 years. They are out, and then you begin to wonder, why are people leaving? It's just a question. People have a lot of reasons for leaving big tech companies anyway. So these are among many other reasons why people don't want to work in the big tech companies. For me personally, I don't have a problem working with them. It's just that, if you know from my previous videos, you would know that I'm a pharmacist who transitioned into software development. And so I kind of have a niche that I want to work in. I specifically desire health tech companies. So companies where, technological companies that are focused on the health sector basically. And like I mentioned earlier, right now I work for a medical devices company. Like those are the kind of companies I want to work for. And most of these big tech companies do not have a very specialized health focused product. Don't get me wrong, some of them do, but quite a number of times recruiters have reached out to me on LinkedIn saying, asking, am I open for work? Am I open to work? Am I interested in working with Google, Amazon, and the likes? And then I'll ask them, are you working? Do you have any health division? Is there any opening in your health focused division? And then some of them would tell me, well, they'll reach back to me. Some of them will say, well, right now that they don't have any health focused products. Some of them would say they have, but they don't have opening in those departments. And I'm like, well, sorry, I'm not interested, because technically speaking, that is what I want to do. And so that is my personal reason why I don't want to work with any of the big tech companies, at least for now, because none of them have openings in, none of them have any health focus department or health focused products that they're working on, and even those that do not have openings in those departments. So practically, if I work for them, I would not enjoy the work I do, because personally I am focused on health tech. General conclusion would be, really, there is no perfect job out there. You could get issues like work-life balance even with small or medium-sized companies, so it's not really limited to the big tech companies alone. Of course, they pay higher, so if there's a motivation to you, then definitely you could focus on getting into the big tech companies. I would just say, in conclusion, just be open to change, because anything can happen at any point in time. So I guess be flexible enough to want to work with any of them. But personally, for me right now, I am focused on health tech, and that is the reason why I don't want to work for any of the big tech companies. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you in the next one. But before that, let me know if you would like to work for the big tech companies, and if you do, why do you want to work with them? If you do not want to work with them, let me know the reasons why you don't want to work with them. So see you in the next video. Au revoir. Au revoir.